Okay, given that, we're going to move on to another, an old business tentative budget. Kevin or Tim, you want to talk about that?
Tim made some of the modifications that were requested by the board's first review of the tentative budget in June. There were several questions submitted by Mr. Walsh. I don't know if I know Mr. Grishin had a question in regards to fund balance, so Tim will address those. Once again, the tentative budget has a surplus of right around $200,000. A lot of work and a lot of sacrifice from all stakeholders has gone in to the development of this budget and to the operational and financial changes this district has made over the last 2 years. And I appreciate the support of the staff and the community and the board as we work through these decisions and to get to where we are right now. Although this is very positive, I think we still have work to do. I think a lot of that was even just resounded in the conversation that just previously followed in regards to we've made some improvements in finances, but we're not financially sound just yet. So I think we have a very solid budget here, and I think we've made some significant changes and improvements to help us get to where we are. And I'll let Tim go into some of the questions and changes that he had from June.
Yeah, as Kevin mentioned, some of the changes that we put into this version of the budget included adding all of the actual costs as of May 31st. I'll provide you with another tentative budget, another copy of it in August that will include the June 30th actual numbers. We didn't receive those numbers in time to get them into this version of it. So this also, on the summary page, also includes the estimated balances for each of the funds that were included in this past year's budget. That will also be updated in the August version that I give to you. We'll have the final June 30th fund balances, beginning balances included in there. The surplus dropped from about $270,000 to $205,000, and one of the major reasons for that is as we go through and we bring in these additional people. When we put the budget together originally in May, there were a lot of open positions, and we didn't know what the salaries were going to be for those people. So as we add those people in and those salaries go into the budget, that's part of what is bringing the expenditures up and bringing the surplus down. There's other changes that take place over the course of the summer, other additional information that you get. For example, the original budget that I gave you included estimates in terms of our title grants. We now have the actual allocations. They're actually going to be a little bit lower, so those numbers were also adjusted in this budget. I would expect I know that in the next month I'll get a final number on the general state aid, so that's also something that might change in the August version that you receive. We'll have a better number in there. There was a question regarding the administrative cost, the limitation. There's a provision in the school code that administrative costs, which includes basically Kevin's department, and it includes fiscal services, which is just my area. It doesn't include my staff. That the expenses for that, the budget for this current year, 2014, can't be more than 5% of what the actual expenses were for last year. They're not going to be. One of the individuals that we had in Kevin's department this past year has been pulled out of his department, is now in with the principal's office. So the expenditures are actually going down a little bit. So we're not going to exceed that 5% limitation. That worksheet is actually put together by the auditors when they perform the audit. It's a part of the annual financial report. The actual numbers for 2013 that go into that report are the audited numbers, and so they're the accrued numbers that the auditors put together. So that's why that report really can't be put together for the budget because we don't have those numbers at this point in time. When we submit the final budget to the state, which will be in October, which is 30 days after you approve it in September. So 30 days later in October, we send it to the state. Then it has to include that administrative cost worksheet in the budget that we send to the state. But at this point in time, we don't have the numbers to plug into that to get the exact numbers. But I did make a note in the assumptions that the administrative costs were going to be less than the 5% restriction that the state had.
Can I ask 2 questions about that? The first one is, and again, this is the ISB thing, it could be wrong, but it lists specific functions and costs that need to be included. And I'll just use one because I know we have people that do this, is 2610 Direction of Central Support Services. Says, example, Director, Manager of Planning, Information Services, Staff Services. Now, I know we have 2 Information Services people. Are they on a different line item in the administrative budget? That we just choose, I mean, maybe we don't have to use that function, but are there costs included in the administrative budget?
Yes, they're included in 2660, so if I could.
What did you describe, director of those people, of that department?
It says, no, Information Services. It's a little unclear how they wrote it. It says Director / Manager of Planning, Information Services, Staff Services. So I think they mean the director of those 3 functions, or functions like them.
Right, so we have functions 2630, which is Information Services, which is our tech department.
Okay.
And then we also have 2660, which is data processing, it was different.
But is our director of IT in our administrative budget when you said we're not going up by 5%?
Technically, he's not included as an administrator.
No, the only administrators that are included in those administrative costs are Kevin and myself. It doesn't include
It
the
also
principal.
says on 2490, other support service, school administration, example, department heads and deans.
Yeah, we
have department heads and deans.
Right, but we don't,
Right, we have
are
to-
you asking how we label them, or should they be counted towards that 5%?
The ISBA guideline on this that I sent you the copy of says these costs are supposed to be included in the administrative cost that we cannot increase by more than 5% without notifying the state about it. So, I mean, there's positions that are on this list that we have people in those positions, and they don't appear to be in this discussion of whether they're part of the administrative cost that this 5% cap applies to.
Tim, I remember Tim McGinnis, we asked this question, was asked by Mr. Walsh our first year here and our second year here, and I know you checked. You checked with the auditors, and I believe you also checked with the attorneys, but if you haven't, verify again. I thought it was just the central office staff. Isn't that what your understanding is?
Yeah, it's well, as we have things budgeted and as we have things in our financials, it's your office and it's me. We're the only 2 people included in that. I think in this case, department heads,
That's union
You know,
because
that
they
would-
don't do more, 60% of their job is classroom. We don't have any department head over 40%. So the
Right.
state and TRS recognize them as teacher certified staff.
right, so they're included in, like, the math department chair is included in the math department, which is part of the education, accounts. It's not into an administrative account.
Well, why don't you just verify one more time, and let's put that worksheet in as a draft, in the final copy that goes in August. It wouldn't stop or impact anything that's being approved tonight as a tentative. And then this way, that worksheet's always in there as, in the table of contents as one of the documents, so that,
But as I'm saying, that until the audit is completed, I don't have the numbers for that worksheet.
right, but the IASB, in the document that he's referencing, does show that you can put draft or local use only, just so people can see in the budget, we're monitoring our administrative costs and how we're budgeting them.
I mean, it's the relevance to me is, if we go over 5%, we have to do some special reporting to state that can continue on, and it seems, whether the official result of this, we wait for our auditors to do for some reason, that's a choice, I guess, that you make, but it seems to me the board needs to know whether that, we went over to 5%. I mean, you're telling us we didn't, which is fine. You've had a way of figuring it out. But it's something you need to know every year, because if you approve it at 6%, now you've got a completely different issue you have to address with the state. And maybe the answer was we should have cut some administrative costs so we don't go over 5%. So you don't have to report it. And that's where I see the gap going. But I also see, by looking at it, again, could be the way they wrote it or something, but there appeared to be positions and functions that they say should be included in this section of the budget that don't appear to be included. And yes, I did ask before, but I keep reading it again and going into more detail, and the answer appears to be different than what the state is saying in the document they're providing.
Okay. I will have more information in August.
Anything else, Tim? So this is a tentative budget that's just for public review. It can't be changed, it can be modified, and will be updated in August. Is that true with the,
Yes, some of the
So,
numbers will be updated in August.
In August, are you going to reflect the fact that we've changed our pay to participate and reduced it by 16,000?
Yes.
Okay.
okay. Any other questions on the budget?
Yeah, I had other questions.
Yeah, there were,
Well, some of some of them are tiered. So the overall was a $65,000 reduction, which would make the salaries go up by $75,000. But how about like the electricity cost? I mean, did we look at what your last year's electricity and gas is not necessarily a reflection of what it's going to be next year?
correct. I was checking, I talked to the gas company that we currently use today, or that we currently use. They're projecting our cost next year to be $80,000. Now, I have it in the budget at $85,000.
Okay.
That was their projection.
Okay.
I tried to get a hold of people at the electric company, but I couldn't get anybody.
Okay.
So I can check further on that and address that in August.
Anything else?
Yeah, this relates, Gary made this point before about
Page?
the page 2, the fund balance of 29% is projected. I mean, that incorporates this insurance change too, right? How do we have an apples to apples comparison to what it was previously? I mean, what percentage is that insurance like taken out of that or increased it? You know,
The top of my head guess, I think I remember something to the impact of, I want to say almost 7%. I forget exactly what it was, but the other thing is he's using a budgeted number. Once we actually put through the actual results of this past year, it's going to be a different percentage anyway. So I think we should wait till we get to the actual last year's numbers coming through on that.
August version.
August version,
Just review
and we
it
can
and-
discuss it.
Right.
Okay, anything else?
A few more questions.
On
Okay.
page 120, I think, again, I don't bring the new one up, but-
120 board book?
Yeah. There's a function, several lines in 1711 that are revenue for athletic, like administration, football, what's the source of all those revenues for athletic administration and girls? Oh, that's the gate receipts? Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Tim, do you want to just summarize? There's a
There
couple
was
of those.
there was a question regarding the, it's on page 122, there was a question regarding the revenue in the operations and maintenance fund. Other local revenue, this past year, $79,900. Next year, we don't have anything budgeted. That $79,900 included a $40,000 grant that we received from Airmark when we renewed their contract. I don't anticipate, we're not going to receive that again next year. That also includes
That's for sure.
$15,000 that we received from the boosters for the sign, and it includes $5,000 that we received from the senior class for the sign. So those are the major things that were in last year's revenue on that line, and I just don't anticipate, I mean, we may receive some, but at this point, I don't know of anything, so I haven't budgeted anything. There were some descriptions that were added on the top of each page, instead of saying account 1, account 2, account 3, I did put in the fact that the first few columns are fund and function and object. The fourth column, we use that again as another descriptor for the object, whether it's purchase service, whether it's a salary. And then the final number that we use on the expenditure side, it designates a department, like whether it's a math department, the English department, et cetera. There was also the account description number 4 is missing here, and it really, it's a repeat of account 3. It would be the same as what is described there as account description 3, so we don't just put that in again, because it would be the same. But I thought I tried to get most of the descriptions with regard to special ed levy and those types of things that were requested the last time, and plug those in. There was a question regarding the investigators.
What page?
This is on page 141. We interviewed 4 different organizations to handle our residency next year. Instead of having employees handling all the residency investigations, we're going to go with a firm, just so we can shift that liability over to a firm that does this. We've interviewed 4 firms. We're basically going to pick one of those firms, and we've talked to them about actually hiring the individual that we had as an employee, so that we have some continuity in terms of the investigations. We increased that budget from $10,000 to $15,000. That's not something that we necessarily have to use that money, but there may be some additional fees because we're going to an outside firm as opposed to handling that internally.
I think when he gives you a page number, you gotta add 1.
Yeah. At 142, about 4 from the top.
Oh, all right, that may be.
I saw everyone kind of staring blankly.
Okay. I may be looking at it wrong.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else, Tim?
I'm sorry, I thought we had an outside firm doing that.
No, we don't.
No.
We had it 2 years ago, or?
No. We're using investigators to investigate all of our residency claims, but I updated the board on that during a closed session last month, 2 months ago, in May. That those investigators were our employees. And in order to shift that liability and responsibility, we should shift that to an outside firm as a purchase service.
There are employees, what, by some,
They are our
for
employees.
tax? They always were.
They're on our payroll.
They're on our payroll.
were-
That's,
Okay.
so,
That was something the interim
Right.
superintendent
Okay.
had on the books.
Tim, one other question on the,
What page?
I have the wrong fund. Well, it's 149 in the original package.
should be 150.
On the O&M budget for Fund 20, there's several of the lines where we budgeted numbers last year, like, for instance, the first 3 on storm damage, and we're not budgeting, and we have, like, emergency repairs was a line where we, budgeted 25,000. We actually spent 36,000, and now we're not budgeting anything. I mean, you told us you went through and thought about the line items, but why would we have categories where we had expenditures like, especially, I mean, I don't know how you budget for storm damage, but emergency repairs, I assume they come up, I don't know what they're for, but every year, and we went over budget last year, and we're saying 0 for next year.
It's been combined. If you go up a little bit higher, there's
Okay.
there's a line there for repair projects. I was never quite sure what the difference was between a
Oh.
repair project and an emergency repair.
Okay,
So I just combined it into one account.
okay.
And so you'll notice that that's $65,000.
Does that include the storm damage then, too? Do we need a budget for that? Because our actual through May was $24,000, and we're saying 0.
Right, that was, this storm damage had to do with the,
Carryover from the year before?
it was, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
The major change in the operations and maintenance fund is in the capital expenditures. We jumped that up quite a bit.
Right.
That went up by $100,000, and if you look at the total expenditures, they went up by about $100,000. So some of that was just shifting money
Okay.
between accounts to
Thank you.
reflect more what the actual numbers were.
Okay, anything else?
I have a question. Tim and Gary, I believe you did an extensive evaluation on our rental spaces. Are you happy with those rental costs? Did we want to increase those costs for this year's budget?
It's an agenda item.
It's on the, farther down on the
Okay.
agenda item. It's a
Tim
good
and
question.
John,
though.
Tim and John, okay. Well, wasn't it Tim and
No.
Gary at first who
No.
did the rental costs? I thought it was the first year we were on the board, two of you.
I always advocate,
Picked
make
it
sure,
apart.
make sure we
You always
cover all our costs.
I've
Yeah.
worked
And then I let
closely-
these guys
I've worked
do it.
closely with Dr. Keene and Mr.
Okay.
Walsh.
All right, any other questions on this, Tim, that we gotta have, that you have answers for?
You ready?
You ready? All right, so Tim, I got one question for you before where, if people watching the TV right now, where can they wanna view the budget, where can they view the budget at?
They can come to the business office, and we'll have copies of it there that people can look at. We can also put this online, on the website.
Needs to be online.
Okay, it'll be online then. All right, do I have a motion on this, please?
Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois, hereby approves and adopts the budget containing estimates of amounts available in each fund as a tentative budget drafted by the superintendent and chief school business official as set forth in Policy 410, Fiscal and Business Management, for said school district for the fiscal year 2013-2014, and be it further resolved that this tentative budget, following adoption by this Board of Education, shall be made conveniently available to the public for inspection for at least 30 days prior to final adoption thereof at the September 10, 2013 board meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tim Walsh. Any other discussion? Mary Ann?
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Gritchen,
Yes.
Mrs. Fresca.
Yes.
Mr. Jeffson.
Yes.
Dr. King.
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Mr. Cindy.
Yes.
Before we move to new business,
Yeah.
on our agenda, you know, we have these old items that are on here, but they don't have dates,
Oh, okay.
and only one of them came from last month. I believe the tentative budget was a new item last month.
I'll have Mary Ann make sure she puts the
Make
date
sure.
on.
You know, you can separate them between action items that you can tell us that we're gonna do action and non-action items. Because I remember last month, I said, oh, there's no old business, thinking that we actually did everything we were supposed to do and we were up to date. And then I came back this month and there was actually some old business that should have been listed
So Mary Ann, if
on
you
there.
put that on like we did before.
So you can have it action items, old business action items, and old business non-action items, but I just don't want things to fall off the
No, we'll
agenda,
leave-
so we can,
We've always had the practice of leaving them on and having
Yeah.
a date when they were first put on. We'll just continue to follow that.
yeah.
So like the English proposal should have just been running, even though we weren't voting on it. When we get to the end of the agenda, I should just say, no,
We're not
there's
doing
nothing
anything
on this
tonight,
at this
yeah.
time. Right.
Okay, thank you.